Not in a big city and not at the state, but on the local level, many of us are volunteer elected officials. Um, Usually in the city council realm, when you get up to the county supervisor, county supervisors are paid, and then of course state legislators are paid. Everybody is busy and everyone is tracking 1,000 different things. And so we all know that, but I think the other thing to really remember, and this was so true of me back in 2006 when this thing called community choice aggregation came walking through the door, we're tracking things that have nothing to do with clean energy. We really speak in the paradigm of environmental initiatives, sustainability initiatives. It has a much bigger policy umbrella than really thinking about clean energy, and local clean energy is even more specific than that. So most aren't thinking about energy, and the 99.9% of us don't know a thing about it. So that's not a bad thing. It just serves up an opportunity for you to educate, and there is a very specific way to do that. What we are learning, particularly in the CCA space, but I'll bet you Allison from Solar Sonoma County and Woody and those of you who are in this space, there are folks who are elected officials who don't think that government really has a place in local clean energy at all. And if they do, it's from a very macro policy perspective, or it may be from a regulatory perspective. You know, we need to watch what the California Energy Commission is doing, or we're the watchdogs for the CPUC. But when it comes to really engaging in how you put a blueprint together for local clean energy and what that looks like, that's a much heavier lift. And I would encourage any of you guys to speak up, and we'll talk about this in a minute. Term limits shouldn't matter, but they do. So what I mean by that is that many folks are termed out after 8 years, some 12. And so when you're talking about local clean energy, which is a really long-term end game, but it's a long-term strategy, one of the things we'll be talking about is how you serve it up in phased pieces so that you create the win. Remember that is the motto. You create that win that fits into their term situation, and take into account when they're running for re-election and what that means. We're just chatting with Jerry Braun over here from the IRES network in Davis. 2 of their city council members are running for the state assembly, so the conversation about CCA has, not surprisingly, gone a little quiet. So this is the up and downs of how that works in the world of politics. And it's just reminded me, don't forget their staff, because especially at the local level, and those of us who are volunteers, we rely heavily on the staff report. So what you're really gaming for is the win, which is the staff recommendation to do what you want them to do. So it's critical that you get down to the level of government staff, all really bright people, all seriously multitasking in a changing bureaucratic environment. There is nothing private sector about what we do, which is really frustrating for the private sector, because it's a lot of hurry up and wait. It just is. And so you gotta kind of have a long view and be willing to ride the wave. Focus is different at the state and local level. In my experience, some of you guys may disagree, but the state is really focused on the macro policy and state infrastructure, where when you're approaching a local elected, that could be Oakland, it could be where I live in Mill Valley, we're really concerned with everyday delivery of services. We're looking at police, fire, potholes, health and human services, parks and rec. So energy falls under the rubric of sustainability efforts, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, but there's a way to sell it. Most have good relationships with their elected leaders. Most staff like a good challenge and new information, but the thing that is key about staff, and I'd love to hear from other experiences, is that I think it has to be served up to them in a way that either fits within their current scope of work, so it's not feeling like this huge new lift, or it's done in a way that it's somehow supplemented with grant funding, or that you're going to be providing some additional staff support to help them do it. ICLEI was very good about that. When they first came on board, they served up technical support to the cities to say, hey, listen, we'll help you do this. And that really made all the difference. They went from this to, okay, we'll consider it. Next slide, and then I'll be quiet after that. So best ways to engage in a site, and this is just my personal opinion with the experience that I have. I'd love to hear from others on this. The first thing is you've got to do your homework. You must define and be really clear about what the policy nexus is. How does what it is you're trying to do fit very, very specifically into their goals and objectives for their particular geography and constituency? Find the home base. So is what you're trying to do, is there a link to it in the Climate Action Plan? Is it part of the Sustainability Commission? Is it part of some other set of environmental goals? Creating that link will help get you that first meeting. Identify bipartisan aspects. So in anything, even as progressive as we might think all of our work is, there's likely to be a centrist or even Republican bent or approach to what it is we're doing. And so, in my opinion, better off to find what appeals to the environmental community, what appeals to the progressive elected leader, what appeals to the centrist, what appeals to somebody who might be from the Tea Party, but really breaking down your proposal to understand how different pieces of it all fit together so that it has a bipartisan appeal. And then you figure out how to talk about those elements to each of your different electeds that you're trying to influence in a different way. So there are different strategies and different talking points for each of those game plans. Really important to articulate the economic benefits of what you're trying to do, and there certainly are a lot. In CCA, I'll tell you, that's been tougher out here because we don't see a lot of rate savings yet. And with the local jobs aspect and the local build out, we can do a lot of those numbers, but until this really begins to happen, it's tough to point and say, look what happened in Sonoma, what will happen in Sonoma, look what's starting to happen in Marin. So it takes a little while to build up the economic case, but you got to have it. And you got to be honest with your elected and the staff about what are the risks, how do you mitigate them, and what are the cost impacts. You got to tell both sides of the story, or they won't believe you, and you won't have as much credibility. Just think about it as a business proposal. This one, gently appeal to their sense of leadership, legacy, and competition. So basically appeal to our ego. Everybody wants to, especially for an elected, you want to know that you did something that mattered, that served your constituency, and frankly, if we're going to compete a little bit with our colleagues and we're going to be the winning hero here by advancing this program, nothing wrong with a little bit of healthy competition and shopping the concept and letting them know that you're shopping the concept. Hey, you have an opportunity to take a leadership role. This happened just 2 weeks ago in San Diego. And now we see San Diego County and San Diego, the city of San Diego, lining up on parallel, moving towards CCA, and it's a matter of who's going to win. Let them duke it out. So we planted those seeds. Provide accurate, digestible information. Keep it simple, stupid. Totally stupid in 2005 and 6 about this issue called energy and CCA. And so really, it's one picture. Pictures, success stories, nothing complicated, nothing technical. Offer political cover. I had specific points on this political cover one. Share success stories. So how did the program you're trying to get underway, how did it work in the city of Chicago? How did it work in Fresno, California? You need to present stories for how this worked or an iteration of it worked in another community, because then they're not feeling like they're hanging out on a limb. As much as an elected official wants to be a hero, they don't want to a lot of us don't have an entrepreneurial spirit. That's not what the government is about. So you got to find the political cover for where and how it was done successfully elsewhere. You got to engage key constituency groups. Let them know who's endorsing you, not only personally, but petitions and all the stuff Jeff's going to cover. You need to understand who supports it, not only on their own board of supervisors or who among their colleagues, who's going to oppose it. It's a very intuitive, kind of personal response to all of this. Provide a clear path forward. Be direct. Specific doable actions. So when somebody comes to me locally and says, hey, we want to we want to redo the entire grid of Mill Valley and, do green streets, and it's going to be a whole green streets thing, yada yada. I'm on board with that general proposal, umbrella idea, but the winning strategy is the person that comes in and says, and here's what we need from you today. All we need from you today is to get it on your agenda. Doable. Next, okay, now what we need from you is we need a resolution. So you're feeding these things in bite-sized, achievable pieces. I call this the bite-size, not the fire hose. And then, good to understand your opposition. One thing is, and I can say this, interesting, because I actually did this at the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, and I should have known better. Threats don't work. Threats don't work. So to approach an elected official and appeal to their sense of leadership and hero and intellect and all that works. When you approach an elected official and say, hey, if you don't do this, I'm going to motivate, your opposition, and we're going to file a recall, or, oh, by the way, we know that you've been in cahoots with PG&E and you're a bad guy. And I mean, truthfully, all that does is turn people off and say, I'm not voting for whatever it is you want. The ears just turned off. So
Ted Cruz just showed that off, right?
Right. Hey, that's a good thing, that they pushed it and they didn't win.
Hey y'all, I'm going to use this because I like to walk around while I talk to people. Is this on? Yes. Great. So I'm Jess Durbin Ackerman. I'm from the Sierra Club, the Bay chapter again. So thank you so much, Sean. That was a really good overview of who we're trying to influence. And now I'm going to talk about what tools we use and what strategies we use to influence them. So all of our elected officials come from the community, right? You can't really run for office if you don't have anyone supporting you. So that is those relationships and that support that our elected officials have when they're running is really important to what they actually choose to do when they're in office. And those are the people that they have the strongest relationships when they're in office, usually are the people that help get them elected or who they've worked with in the past before they decide to run for office. So power mapping, electoral support is I guess is what I'm talking about, and Sierra Club does that a lot. We have a C4 and a C3 organization, so we can do electoral work as much as we want as long as we have funding for it. So we do make political endorsements, and we spend a lot of volunteer resources putting people out on phone banks and canvassing during the political season to actually get folks elected. We want people in office that care about our values and that will actually do the work that needs to be done to make the transition to clean energy. So electoral support is extremely important. If you can't do that, knowing the people that do or having relationships with organizations that these people do come from is very important. So power mapping, building coalitions, and grassroots power are all ways that you can influence elected officials and very important strategies to actually becoming part of their network so that you're trusted and a friend to these people. They're not going to talk to you or necessarily be extremely friendly to you if they've never heard of you or they don't know any connections to who you are or you don't have any connections to them already. Knowing your opposition and their messaging is really important when you're going up against a big fight. In San Francisco, we've been working on the CCA program there, Clean Power SF, and we had a very well-funded opposition against us that was using really slick messaging, but they were wrong. They were trying to deceive people, so we knew that, and we confronted that in our messaging. We didn't ignore it, and that's really important, because if people are hearing a message that goes directly against what you're saying, then they're going to be confused and not know who to trust. So you need to be able to confront them and use the truth, basically, to fight that. And also, clear timeline for pressure points. There's nothing worse than working on a campaign and not knowing a vote is coming up or not having your ducks in a row before a vote comes up and realizing, oh, we don't have the votes we need for this. And to go back after that is extremely hard. So really, when you're lining up a campaign, make sure you know exactly where the pressure points and the decision-making points are. So that's strategy, and then in terms of actual tools. So for your campaign to have relevant messaging. So Tom Steyer's talked about this right before lunch. Using messaging that actually speaks to the people that you're trying to influence. If you're going after a certain district, know who is in that district, know the makeup of that district, and talk to those people in a way that they can understand that speaks to their values, what they care about. Social and traditional media. So Sierra Club uses social media extremely well. We also love to do stunts that bring out the traditional media or mass days of action. So getting media hits actually can reach people that you won't reach normally through your networks. Petitions and action alerts. So these are used a lot today. How many people get Move On or other kinds of action alerts every day in your mailbox, right? So we're kind of becoming overcome with those. So if you use those strategically, they can be really helpful. For example, we're working against an oil terminal project that's proposed for Pittsburgh, California, and they're getting petitions from only Pittsburgh residents because the city council wants to hear from their residents and their constituents who don't want to have this project in their backyard. So petitions and action alerts can be used effectively if you strategically use them and know who you're trying to get to sign those things. Or if you have a mass. So, if you can send in 1 million comments in the United States against the Keystone XL, which we did with a bunch of our partners this last year, then that's also effective. So strategically or en masse. Community forums and outreach. So that's another great tactic to use, is actually getting community members out one-on-one, talking to their neighbors and their other community members. So having someone that lives in Pittsburgh go out to their farmer's market and talk to other Pittsburgh residents, or going door to door to talk to their own people on their block. Also having a community meeting or some kind of town hall, which doesn't paint the issue in a way that makes it seem one-sided, but makes it seem like it's open to discuss what's going on so that anyone that's heard of this can come in. Sign-on letters, it's kind of like part of coalition building. Even if organizations can't lend their staff time to something, but they can put their name on something because they believe it, that also helps influence elected officials. If you strategically seek out organizations or community organizations that will affect your target. Strategic events, that's kind of like stunts, what I was talking about before, massive days of action, things that are really media-worthy or eye-catching, unusual. People running down the middle of the street in some weird costumes or something obviously is eye-catching, or, And lobby visits. So lobby visits is not necessarily lobbying, but it's just meeting with your elected officials, and knowing what you're doing when you get there is really, really important. Being professional, bringing strategic people with you. So maybe if you don't know the person you're trying to lobby, bringing someone from a community organization that means a lot to them to the meeting will be helpful. And also lobby packets. So, like Sean said, be really, really, keep it simple, stupid. Bring the information that is relevant. Maybe you can bring a little bit more of the background information so the person's staff can read it and understand the issue. But really, you have to make sure that you have all the relevant information with you, and know if you don't know how to answer a question, tell them you'll follow up with them, but try to anticipate any questions that they will have.
The things that work well for us, robocalls and robo-emails are intensely irritating. So they sort of work like a threat. After a while, it's like, now you're overflooding my email box and my voicemail thing, and I'm mad, so I'm less likely to be feeling really good about supporting your effort. So you just got to think about the irritants as well. Sign-on letters are really effective. Why? Because it's one letter with a whole list of influential names. Perfect. Slam dunk. Even more effective, in my opinion, than petitions. Because petitions are good, but you're coming up and you've got this many pieces of paper and you're slamming it down on the, I think petitions are good, and you guys are really good at saying, here's how many numbers we have in the city of San Francisco, in the county, and you break it down by geography. Last thing I'll say is organizing for action. I don't know how many of you guys have been following what they've been doing relative to the government closure. They did a heck of a job because they sent out e-blasts, pretty much every day, except that they were informational. What's happening today, or it was every other day. You could sign on for $19. Easy peasy. Push the button, good. We're good for $19. You could do that multiple times. And then today, we got a really nice thank you for participating. So that to me is a very succinct email strategy that's not robo emails. And I think power mapping is really important. That's the preliminary strategy where you go in and you say, who's on our side, who's not, who's in the middle. Focus on the votes in the middle. Don't waste your time on the people who are definitely no or the people who already support you. Put most of your energy on pushing folks off the fence.
My personal experience dealing with PG&E the past couple of years, I'm a renewable energy engineer, and I like to see that we're trying not to hone in on these emotional operatives like threat, fight, cost, and raising issues of requiring adaptation and long-term investment. And I'm a huge supporter of distributed generation, electrical generation, and electrical distribution networks. And I also believe we need to recenter our values that are bringing us to this point in history. What I'd like to say is I think there are 4 cultural elements that need to be adopted to successfully make this shift. 1's an entrepreneurial mindset. 2 is building compassion for the core. 3 is becoming rational about emotions and values. And 4 is developing a system mindset, becoming bigger picture systems architects by business becoming co-creative partners with government and in this case utilities. And I would just like everybody to start cogitating on that and thinking, about how to bridge and co-collaborate better. Because when I've done this, it's gotten me nowhere.
When you've done what? Oh, right. Pitchforks. Pitchforks don't work.
I work for Earth Justice. It's a statewide office, but we do a lot of our work in the Central Valley. And just out of curiosity, I'm wondering what you propose doing when ignoring everyone who says no is not really practical, because a lot of people are saying no, when it's a more conservative climate than maybe the immediate Bay Area work.
Somebody else want to answer that? Jason, the master of overcoming no.
Yeah, overcoming no. And that's when you have to change the conversation about what you're trying to get them to do. I'll take Clean Power SF, in the city of San Francisco. We had quite a few folks originally that were not all that excited about it. But what you have to do is change what your talking points are on it. You got to figure out what is the person, what do they care about. I'll give you an example. One of the supervisors in San Francisco really cares about creating jobs. So instead of talking about the environmental aspects with that supervisor, you go and talk about how this can create jobs for the district. And you find out what you do is you look at all the legislation that person has sponsored and voted for, and you just really have to do some serious homework on what they care about. And then you figure out how to take what you're working on and make it be what they care about. And that's how you can change some of those no's to maybes and eventually yeses. And you should expect to change them to maybes first. Don't expect to get them to yes right away. They will go from no, maybe, then hopefully yes.
And just to follow that up a little bit, power mapping you can do with a community or board or commission, but you can also do it with individuals. So you do it first to figure out who you're going to target, and then you do it individually for each person and see every single piece of their life that you can influence. Like, you go talk to somebody's wife or their daughter, and you have
That
a
is scary
conversation
right
with them.
there.
No, that's actually, that works.
I know. It's sad.
It's like honestly, politicians coming around to equal rights because their kids are gay.
Right.
Like going and talk to them and saying, hey, this is actually important, and having their kids talk to these elected officials, that helps. So if you can influence elected officials, they're there to do a public service, and any way that you can get to them, not stalking them and not creepily, but you can use those.
And so what I'm interested in doing is actually, I'm a member of the California and the national boards in self-storage, and looking at bringing self-storage as being a distributed power source, and actually up and down this state where we not just influence PG&E, but SoCal Edison, NCNEO Gas and Electric. So I'm looking for help in how to organize kind of a statewide program so we could not just be in one jurisdiction, but 3, and work as a cooperative to produce power. In California, there's about 200 million square feet of self-storage right now. So that's a lot of existing structures.
I see. Got it.
And so you could use those in a distributed basis to create power.
Got it.
Now, obviously, with storage issues, it's a storage business, so if there's an economic reason to do that, you get owners to do that. I'm looking at potentially doing that in Brentwood right now on a facility I own. So anyway, we kind of have the buildings already built. Now it's a matter of putting panels on top of them and putting storage in some of the emptier units that are less likely to be used if you can make it work on a single line system.
One of the real challenges for me personally, and I've seen it organizationally too, is
kind of the war of attrition strategy that local governments are really, really adept at, and they have 1,000,001 ways of taking it off calendar, forming a committee, having a task force, commissioning a report. I mean, you know. And so and sometimes those measures are appropriate. And how can we distinguish as citizen activists, like when that's an appropriate move that we should welcome versus, oh my God, this is, they're just shining us on again.
So to me, that's when a good personal relationship really matters, because we have that a lot, and some of it is just tactical. And so the ability for you to pick up the phone and say, hey, what's really going on here? Should I be worried or not? That's the value of that personal relationship.
And that could be with an elected official or staff. In whatever kind of government you're trying to influence. But if you have relationships within the government, then that really helps to know what's
And
going
that
on.
also helps you know, like, do we need to turn out 200 people for tonight's vote, or is this just a pro forma vote? Because it would help us if you don't have 200 people in the room either. So really understanding when to make the big push and when it's okay just to have a couple of representatives in the room.
I don't think it's a bad idea to use the public forum time before a city council meeting, which I've done, just to get the conversation started. I walked in with 4 of my high school interns, and I thought, this will work well. They got received with such a warm reception. The mayor came up. It was a summer meeting anyway. There weren't many other people hanging out, but we got the ball rolling, and they made it. We made it clear to them, we've got youth on this issue, and what are you going to do about it? So it did take a few calls for me to do some follow-up, because we were asking, we want to go 100% renewable. That's what we put on their plate. It was the vice mayor that came back to me who gave me, this is how you really want to act on it. You want to talk to our city engineer. The city engineer could be talking to our city lawyer.
Public Works.
And if they design a project, then it will become a meeting with a recommendation to the council. He laid it right out on a platter for me. So we're acting on that. Now I have a counterpart doing the same project in San Ramon. I live in Danville. We're doing a Contra Costa project. He's learned from his staff meetings, they want to have numbers. They want to see how many residents are behind this. So we've created an online petition. I know you're saying petitions aren't good, but we're now working.
Online's
with
great.
I'm sorry?
Online's great.
Yes, and we're handing out petitions. I'm finding 3 locations now in downtown areas where, fortunately, we have a mix of retailers that are supporting us, like Pete's Coffee and Starbucks, are allowing us to be out front of them, and I'm getting copies of signatures that will go onto the online petition. And this is becoming a working model for us.
Good. That's awesome. ABAG, county councils of mayors and council members, there are other ways to skin the cat. So also think about collections. Where do your elected officials meet? What are the organizations that they work through to get stuff done? And talk to Jessica, Sierra Club, man, they're the grassroots kings and queens. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Sorry it was short.